Hey sweet people, and welcome back to my channel, or if it's your first time here, welcome especially. I'm Sally and I'm so glad you've stopped by. We are cuddled up by the fire today with a warm cup of tea, channeling the ultimate cozy autumn vibes, and we are going to be diving into a talk about histamines and histamine intolerance. You might not be familiar with that verbiage, specifically histamines or histamine intolerance, but this applies to honestly an unfortunate number of people in this day and age due to the modern diet and then the digestive distress that can result from it, nutrient deficiencies, all of that. If you are someone who deals with a lot of digestive symptoms, or you're someone who has a lot of allergies, maybe you have allergic reactions, even when there's no perceived allergen present, maybe you struggle with a lot of congestion, skin irritation, there is a decent chance that this applies to you to at least some extent. But that being said, please understand that every person is different. When I get into kind of course of action, part of that is applying to more extreme cases, we will say. So this is for educational purposes only. Please always consult your practitioner, your doctor, before making, changes in your diet. So what are histamines? I have a notebook down here just so I can get all my definitions straight and stay on track. So if I'm looking down, that is what's going on. But histamines are an organic compound in the body involved in local immune response communication, along with the regulation of physiological functions in the gut, and which also act as neurotransmitters for certain parts of the body. Now, based on that definition, hopefully you can tell that histamines are actually very important. They aid in communication in the body, and they are important when it comes to having a legitimate immune response, which obviously is very necessary. You want your immune system to work when it needs to work. When we run into an issue is when we have excess histamine in our bodies or we cannot get rid of it. So what is going to cause that excess histamine or the inability to break down histamine? This is largely related to an enzyme that lives in our digestive tract called DAO, and DAO stands for diamine oxidase. This is responsible for the breakdown of histamine. And let me just say, there are some other enzymes, one other one in particular with a very long name that I am not going to try to say right now, that are involved in this process, but DAO is generally what we are paying attention to when it comes to histamine intolerance. So if we don't have enough of DAO, then we are not going to be able to break down histamines adequately, and we are going to see a lot of symptoms because of it. Symptoms may include anything from bloating, diarrhea, nausea, flushing really easily. So more digestive symptoms, like that flushing, or you might see more respiratory symptoms. So you might see constant congestion or frequent congestion, itchy, watery eyes, those typical allergy symptoms, but on a pretty consistent basis. And this is actually something that my husband and I have firsthand experience with. To tell a little story, this past spring and summer, Samuel was having a really bad allergic reaction. And he's always had allergies. It's always been something that he has struggled with, but it was at the point where he was reacting to everything. And everything and nothing. We couldn't figure out what it was. In our apartment at the time, which definitely didn't have the best air quality, we were thinking it probably, was related to air quality, or it was related potentially to mold. Yes, there was probably a mold problem in that apartment if we were being completely honest, but then we left and it didn't go away. We stayed with my family for a little bit, and Samuel is allergic to cats. So obviously he was having a reaction to the cats. So that wasn't really a good example at all, but our thought process was, okay, we're going to go to Europe, completely different environment. Where we're staying should have pretty clean air. Presumably that's going to kind of provide a reset, help him to feel better. Well, it did not. Every new place we went, and we went to 3 different countries and multiple locations within those countries, every single location we went, he was reacting to something. And it was getting to the point where not only was he having congestion, watery eyes, itchy throat, but it was really affecting his ability to breathe. And I mean, there were nights where he was waking up because he couldn't fully breathe. And that was when it was like, this is terrifying. We need to figure out what is going on. Is this an allergy, a true allergy, or something else? And that's when we really started doing our research and learning that in his case, it was related to DAO and histamine intolerance. So that's just an example of the respiratory symptoms that could result, but some people are having a lot of digestive distress, or maybe it's skin irritation that they're experiencing. It can look different for everybody. And again, just because you're experiencing allergies, digestive distress, or skin irritation doesn't mean that this is necessarily the number one thing that's going on or the thing that's going on, but it's just something to be aware of, and it's definitely something to talk to your practitioner about to make sure that they are considering all the factors and can help you with this by supporting the foundations. Okay, so if we have low DAO, let me restate that question. What is going to cause low DAO? So first of all, there are a number of external factors that can do this. Many drugs that you could be taking do have an impact. Number one, antihistamines. And this is a huge issue that we ran into with Samuel. While you don't want to be on antihistamines all the time, and we were aware of this, it was so bad that all he could do to live his life, to even get sleep, was to pop antihistamines. And he was taking a large amount of them, a large dose, very regularly. And it was at the point where they were not really working as well as they should, but it was better than nothing. And so it was just this nasty cycle that he unfortunately had to lean into. So antihistamines are one of them. Anti-inflammatory drugs are another one, so non-steroidal, to be specific, anti-inflammatory drugs. Think ibuprofen, think aspirin. These are two that can really do it. I'm not against, I hope everyone knows, I do not take an extremist position really when it comes to any of this. I understand that sometimes ibuprofen is the way to go. Like, I'm not above that. Sometimes if the pain gets bad enough, if you have a headache, if something's going on, I understand ibuprofen. But I save that for very extreme situations, because if you're taking it consistently, that's when you're going to start to see more of an impact on that DAO production. And then antibiotics as well can also affect your DAO production. Antibiotics can wreak havoc on the gut in many different ways. Thank God for antibiotics. They save so many lives, but it's really something that we want to avoid unless we really need to be taking antibiotics. So beyond medicine, alcohol can also affect our DAO production. If you're having a lot of alcohol on a regular basis, that's definitely something that can contribute. And then in terms of what's going on at the foundational level, in terms of your body, leaky gut is a big one. Now, I will link below my video that is talking about food intolerances, which gets into leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability a little bit. But essentially what is going on here is your lining of your digestive tract is compromised, and food is getting into your bloodstream and your body reacts to the food. So that is a major contributor to low DAO and to histamine intolerance. And then furthermore, nutrient deficiencies can be a really big contributor, and fatty acid imbalance can be a really big contributor. So note that these things usually don't operate in isolation. When you're thinking about the nutrients, when you're thinking about the digestive health, and when you're thinking about the fatty acids, those are all what we call nutritional foundations, and those things get very intertwined. So if you're working with a holistic health practitioner, hopefully what they're going to do is go down to that foundational level, do an analysis based on your kind of current routine, what you're eating, what your lifestyle looks like, what your symptoms are, and be able to figure out what steps need to be taken, kind of in what order, to provide the best support for your body. So again, leaky gut, that digestive distress, nutrient deficiencies, fatty acid imbalance, and there is an inflammatory factor in all of this. So with fatty acids, for instance, I have a video on fatty acids as well, link that below, but fatty acids play a big role in regulating inflammation, and then our gut health has to do with inflammation, and so all of it can compound and spiral out of control. Okay, what to do if you are experiencing histamine intolerance. The first thing we need to do is get off antihistamines. And I know that can be really difficult, especially if you feel like you are just barely hanging on, struggling through it. My heart goes out to you. I hear that, and that is so difficult. What we are gonna look for is essentially minimal intervention that will allow you to get by and cope and regulate inflammation in the short term to help you address the underlying issues and then hopefully be off everything altogether. So understand, I cannot prescribe anyone anything, and this is very general advice, but I would switch from antihistamines to, if you need to, a corticosteroid. For instance, Samuel was using a nasal corticosteroid, which you don't want to be on for a super long period of time. That has side effects of its own, but it is not going to inhibit DAO production in the same way as those antihistamines are. But switch to that corticosteroid to regulate your inflammation so that your body has time to heal. That can look different ways. Maybe it's topical depending on your symptoms. But I would say in choosing this route, obviously talk to your doctor, and you want to look for the least intervention possible, the mildest corticosteroid possible if you need something to help regulate symptoms, again, while you address the underlying condition. If you can go without, then awesome, go without. But like in Samuel's case, for instance, he was so inflamed that was just causing more stress to his body, that it was feeding this nasty cycle. And I honestly see this in a lot of people. It feeds this nasty cycle that you can't get on top of. So that's where we can use something like a corticosteroid to get a step on top and then fix what's going on underneath. Okay, so enough of that. So get off antihistamines if you are on them, if you are on anti-inflammatory drugs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs regularly, get off those as well. Antibiotics, obviously, if you need to be on them, you need to be on them, but when you finish the course, just, minimize. Okay, we've talked about all of that. And then we want to, in the short term, limit high histamine foods. And I want to make it very clear, anytime I talk about limiting certain foods, I'm really not suggesting that you cut these out of your diet for good. Ideally, we are going to be able to eat a wide array of many different foods throughout the vast majority of our lives. That helps us to support those nutritional foundations, to get all of our nutrients in. I think it's really important. But we want to remove fuel from the fire in the short term so that we can, again, calm everything down while we boost that DAO production. So obviously we do want to avoid alcohol, especially excess alcohol, being really, really, really careful about any of it at all if you are having these reactions. And then you want to limit caffeine consumption. Caffeine is a contributor unless it's super extreme. I'm not going to say, oh, you need to get off caffeine altogether, but I would just be mindful of how much you are consuming. Fermented foods are a big one. And fermented foods, as many of you know, can be incredibly supportive in the diet, especially for regulating your gut microbiome, feeding a healthy gut microbiome. But if you're really struggling with histamine intolerance, they are high histamine, and they're just going to cause more reaction, more inflammation. So in the short term, we do want to stay away from them. And in general, that's just another reason to eat them in moderation and not go absolutely insane. This is our problem here because Samuel, who's standing over here, loves kimchi and sauerkraut so much that I think he could eat an entire bucket of it in one sitting. But that's an aside. So also things like aged cheeses or cured meats, those foods that are more preserved, even if it's using a natural method, which is perfectly fine for the most part, they're going to be higher in histamine and often cause a reaction. Now, the extent to which we need to limit certain foods is going to vary on the individual, because you could get into even more foods that are high histamine but a little bit lower than those. Nuts and certain legumes as a whole are also something to be mindful of. If you're eating a lot of nuts, this is probably not the best time to be doing that. And of course, we always want to be ideally preparing those nuts properly, soaking them, sprouting them, especially if you're having difficulty with digestion. But again, if you are dealing with histamine intolerance, we might just eliminate nuts for the time being. So that's going to give your body time to recover, and it's also going to kind of give you the space to increase that DAO production. But in terms of what we're doing to actually actively increase DAO production, we want to heal the gut, we want to prioritize fatty acid balance, and we want to address nutrient deficiencies. And in order to do all of these things, we need to be eating lots of whole foods, and that's why we really want to limit the number of different foods that we need to limit. But what we can do is focus on really fresh foods. So focus on fresh meat, fresh eggs. Some people might not be able to tolerate egg whites, but usually they can still tolerate egg yolks. And egg yolks have nutrients that can be really healing. So you might incorporate egg yolks into your diet, those gelatin and collagen rich foods, foods such as squash, which can be really supportive to the digestive tract. And if we can tolerate things like beef liver, raw beef liver or freshly prepared beef liver is going to be lower histamine than beef liver that's been prepared and is sitting for a little bit. So that is something to be mindful of as well. Beef liver is going to have a lot of those nutrients as well, namely some of the B vitamins and selenium that are instrumental in DAO production. Making sure you're eating enough fat, making sure that you are able to absorb fat, and again, that ties back into digestion, is taking a good look at your digestion, figuring out where things are going wrong, if anything's going wrong, and then doing the work you need to do in order to fix that, which is a whole nother video. I will link my video on digestion below. Again, there are bio-individual aspects, and that is an area where I would really encourage you to seek the help of a practitioner. And then furthermore, something we can do is look into DAO supplementation. So you can get DAO in a pill form if this is something you are really struggling with, even if it's in the short term, if we just want to lean on a supplement to help. Definitely something to look into. I honestly do not have any DAO supplement recommendations at this time, so I'm going to leave that as an area for your own research. But I would just encourage you to do the work to heal the underlying issues, identify what they are, heal the issues, working with someone if you need to. And if using a DAO supplement, just as using a corticosteroid, is a part of that healing process, then that's totally fine. But don't use it as a crutch, because ultimately that's not getting to the root of the issue. We want to answer why on the deepest level possible. Why is your body not producing enough of this enzyme? Okay, so I hope that provides some wow, that didn't work. I hope that provides some insight into what histamine intolerance is and how it can be addressed, what histamines are as a whole. Please don't hesitate to comment any questions, comments, or concerns down below. If you do like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That's a huge help. And if you're not yet subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for being here. Until next time, bye y'all.